Time is just gone 8:30 a.m. as we continue with news and views this morning on Salam Media. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show, and we are now taking a look at from the NHI, looking at the education system. Now we have learned about Parliament's portfolio committee on basic education, talking about concluding public consultation for the new Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, and are now in the process of taking this forward. And we know that the committee has spent the last few months getting public feedback to the bill, which proposes certain controversial changes to our schooling system. And this is the reason why we are talking with legal researcher at the Equal Education Legal Center. We're speaking with Katherine Sutherland. Katherine, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we seem to be having this issue every now and then with amendments to bills. Earlier on, I spoke to someone about NET and the NHI, and now we are talking about education, which is another critical issue in South Africa as we speak right now. Now, taking a look at this bill, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, and just to understand this bill, understand the amendments, and what is this bill all about? What are some of the controversies surrounding this bill, Catherine?
So, the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill is amending two acts. It's the Employment of Educators Act and the South African Schools Act. And it's been about a decade since any amendments have happened in the education sector to this degree. So, it's really quite an important moment in time in the sector because as we move forward, we have court cases happening, we have developments in law, and when you have a lack of clarity around what the law is, it becomes more difficult for learners and parents to navigate the system in a way that means that they can actually reach their right to basic education. So what we're looking at in this bill is really just an update of the laws as well as a confirmation of already existing laws that have happened through case law. And some of the I think firstly, it's really important to note that while this bill has been quite controversial, it also does a lot of fantastic things. There are problematic clauses at the same time. So, for example, one of the things that the public has shown a lot of engagement with has been the criminalization of parents when parents and anyone really who stops a learner from going into school or from accessing school. And while that might seem like it has a good meaning intention by trying to ensure that learners actually are able to access their schools, the other side of the coin is that when we criminalize parents for stopping their learners from going to school, it doesn't address the fundamental reason that they're doing that. So sometimes it could be the result of a service delivery protest. Sometimes it could be because a parent just simply doesn't want their learner or their child in a school that's physically dangerous to them because of unsafe infrastructure. So we kind of see a move towards criminalization in the bill generally. And another, I think, a really important thing there is that the last thing that we want to do is take children away from their parents, or rather the opposite. Another controversial adjustment that it's making is the clarification of school governing body powers and the powers of the provincial education department. And this is something that we've seen quite a lot, because when you don't know who really holds the power to determine a language policy or an admissions policy, and to keep it in line with human rights and access to the right to the basic education, it's quite difficult for learners to actually achieve that right or to enforce it. So it provides clarity on the fact that the HOD of a provincial education department has the final say for a language policy as well as an admissions policy, but they must still consult the SGB before placing a learner. And I think there's a lot of controversy around this because people are scared that it infringes upon the right to learn in your own home language. But it is, I think they do take that into account, and the DBE has done a lot of research on how incredibly vital it is for things like literacy and just learning in general to learn in home language. So I don't think that they have underestimated the importance of that. But I think what they're trying to achieve here is that you have sometimes have schools that do not cater to the communities that they're in. So you can have one school that has one particular language and they cater to, a very small part of that community. But at the same time, you have schools surrounded by that one school that are overcrowded, and it's not the best and most equitable use of public resources in the sector. So
Yes,
it's
but
about
also,
that
Catherine, you're
balance.
looking at the school. Looking at school governing bodies now, we know for a long time that those that serve on school governing bodies are unpaid public servants, for want of a better term. But now we are talking about this act holding school governing bodies accountable. Yes, they need to be held accountable for managing the finances of the school, but now taking this to disclosures of financial interests, and also looking at their spouses, looking at their family members. Now, this is the level that this bill is proposing to extend the issues surrounding school governing bodies, and particularly those that are serving on these bodies.
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, there are interesting developments with regards to school governing bodies and their roles. So we will see eventually, we're currently seeing, and it will only get better or only get more prominent, the role of school governing bodies in, for example, infrastructure delivery. And when school governing bodies have to manage a large amount of money that they're getting of public funds to do something as integral as provide services to their learners, it is important that there's a level of accountability there. And so when school governing bodies are procuring contractors or builders, it's really quite essential that it doesn't get to the point where we're seeing the same sorts of corruption that are happening in government, but just in school governing bodies. So I think we have a huge problem of irregular expenditure in the education sector, and one of the ways to deal with that is by putting the money and control in the hands of school governing bodies, because they're part of the community, they care about the learners, they know them well, and they're invested. But at the same time, we need to make sure that that money is spent well. And I think the movement towards holding them more accountable, or just at least putting structures in place to kind of keep tabs on how the money is spent and what their interests are, is an important development.
Well, the one issue that sticks out is allowing schools to sell alcohol outside of school
Absolutely.
hours. Tell us more,
Yes.
Catherine.
So our sister organization, Equal Education, is a movement of learners, parents, and teachers, and they consulted their learners, their learner members. And one of the things that came up was how nervous learners are about this particular amendment. So there are some safeguards in the bill that say, you can't sell alcohol during school hours. Learners aren't allowed access. There's, kinds of rules around how you store the alcohol. But at the same time, we know that schools are meant to be alcohol and drug free zones. And while some schools might have the capacity to really properly regulate it, we know that a lot of schools won't be able to. They won't have the resources to keep an eye on how it unfolds. They won't have the resources to manage what happens when learners come into contact with inebriated adults. And essentially, it's a move towards trying to increase the ability of schools being able to do fundraising, but at what cost? And I think there's been a widespread outrage around this particular provision, and I wouldn't be surprised if they took it out before the next version of this bill.
Yes, and just finally looking at homeschooling and the whole focus on homeschooling, forcing them to be registered. Catherine, if you could just unpack some of that and what is playing out in that regard.
So we already know that homeschooling learners parents have to register their learners already. So this is kind of, it does add a couple of more requirements, but it's not that stringent. And really what's important here is every learner of compulsory school going age, and really every learner entirely, no matter what age they are, has the right to a quality basic education, whether that's at home, whether it's through an independent school or a public school. And we need to have some sort of quality regulation and ensure that you have the right to teach your child at home, but at the same time, they have the right to a quality basic education. So it's about finding that balance, which I think is what the government is trying to do, to ensure that no matter what, no matter where you learn, all learners have access to quality education.
Well, Catherine, we're going to have to leave it at that. We thank you for taking time out this morning talking to us. I'm sure that this is not an issue that's going to go away in a hurry, but we will definitely follow the space. We will follow developments. But for now, we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Katherine Sutherland with us, legal researcher at the Equal Education Legal Center, with us this morning. We come back, we'll be joined by Crown Prince Adil Inchabaleng. We're talking about South Africa receiving a power boost out of Mozambique.